What's going on, guys? My name is Ben, and today we're going over the installation procedures for a throttle. Now, this is going to apply to the newer generations of bikes, so if you purchased about 2019 or 2020 and forward, this is going to apply to you, those F4 trails, those F5 trails, Gladiator, and step-throughs. Now, before we begin, you are going to need a few tools: a 3mm Allen key, a 2.5mm Allen key, and a T25 torque screw. So let's go ahead and start the procedure. To begin, we want to first locate the throttle cable that's coming from the bike. Now, on the F5 trail and some of the other bikes, there are slots on both the left and right side of the frame. But what you want to do is look for a little cable like this. Yours may have an end cap on it as it's a brand new bike. Sometimes they're stuffed in, so what you want to do is gently pull these out. There should be a little slack, and as you can see, more of that cabling came out. Now, before we do this whole install, we will actually want to make sure we have the correct throttle. So what you can do is actually first look and make sure the connections are the same color, and then you can count the number of pins: 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and there's even a notch right on the side that'll help you align them. So before we even do anything else, we want to make sure the throttle's correct. And as you can see on the side here, there's 2 arrows as well, and that's going to allow you to line it up and make sure that it seats fully. Now that we know the connection's good, we can go ahead and begin the rest of the installation procedure. The majority of people are going to want to mount their throttle on the left side of the bike, and I actually recommend that as well, simply because you have your shift knobs on the right side, and that can get a little congested. I would not recommend putting it here if you have one of the geared bikes. So we're going to do it on the left side, and in order to do that, we are going to first need to take off this grip. Now, using the 2.5mm Allen key, you'll see that there are bolts on both the inner and outer sides of that grip. So we're just going to come in here and we're gonna loosen these guys up just enough so that we can have a little bit of wiggle room here. And once these bars rotate, you can actually slide them off like that. Now, as you'll notice, this grip was perfectly in line with the front brake here. When we put the throttle on, you'll see that there's actually gonna be a little bit of end room. So what we're actually gonna do is need to adjust this brake. But before we do that, just gonna unplug my throttle real quick down here. And then we're gonna slide it into position. The next thing we're gonna do is take our torque screw, and we're just gonna loosen the clamp for the front brake here just a little bit so that it slides down. Now, with your throttle loose, your brake loose, and you may even need to adjust your buttons if those are pushed back as well, what we can do is then grab the grip, slide it on, and you wanna make sure that it goes all the way to the end so there's no extra gap up top there. Now that we know that the left grip is fully seated on, we can go ahead and torque it down. I like to make sure that the logos are facing up and that these screws are towards the bottom. Let's go ahead and torque those down. We're still leaving the front brake and the throttle itself loose for now. Just a quick thing to mention, anytime you're tightening something, you want to make sure you don't over torque it. Certain bike components will have exact torque specs, but the smaller the screw, the more gentle you want to be. So with these grips, obviously I could torque them all the way down and strip the screw, excuse me. But what we're looking for is a tightness where if you grip onto it and try and twist, the grip's not going anywhere. And that's kind of where I am now. If I took my Allen key, I could probably torque it down even further, but we don't need that. We want to make sure that it's tight, but not over torqued. So now that that grip's good, we can move on to the other parts. With the grip firmly in place, we can go ahead and start tightening down the other elements. The first thing I want to work on is the brake. Now, before we tighten anything down, what I like to do is go ahead and straddle the bike as if I was riding it. The reason I'm doing that is I want to make sure that the angle of my front brake lever is correct. You don't want it too far down, and you don't want it straight out. Because this one is perfectly in line, I'm gonna go ahead and set them about even, make sure my finger placement is correct, and then torque these guys down. The last step is to tighten down the throttle itself. It secures really easily with this bolt in the back right here. One thing to think about when figuring out your alignment is when you're using the throttle, it's actually gonna be pressed down. So you don't wanna set it to where it's comfortable when you're not using it and then have to bend your thumb all the way down. So I like a point almost perpendicular with the ground where I can comfortably rest my hand, but even when I am using it, I'm not stressing my thumb out or anything like that. So I think this position is pretty good for me. The last thing we're gonna do once the angle is set is go ahead and torque this bad boy down. Again, making sure not to over tighten it. You wanna make sure that it's secure on the bar here. What you can do is actually go ahead and give it a couple quick tests. Pretend that you are riding it. As you can see, it's pretty much locked in place here, not going anywhere. So the final thing, we're gonna go ahead and connect it just as we did before, making sure that these arrows are in line. We wanna make sure those pins seat nicely and really make sure that it's in there. If there's any yellow showing or any of the connector showing, a lot of times the throttle won't work. We need to make sure it's fully seated. So after doing that, power on the bike, and you should be good to go. So that's it, guys. One quick tip before I go. If you're someone who likes to clean up these wires, you can go ahead and zip tie this throttle cable to kind of make everything look a little bit nicer. Do make sure you check the clearance though. After you clamp it down, give your handlebars a good 360-degree turn to make sure nothing's pinching or getting held up. Another thing you may want to note is that depending on the model, some of our bikes need to reach 6 miles an hour before that throttle will actually do anything. So if it comes time to test, make sure you're riding at about 5 to 6 miles an hour. Otherwise, the safety feature on the throttle is that it won't activate. So if there's anything else I didn't cover, any questions you have, please send an email to support@flx.bike and we'd be happy to help you out. Thanks, guys.